Hello and welcome to That Thing I Did for a Year, a podcast where we interview fourth-year University of Toronto students about interesting experiences they had in a year away from school. My name is Ilya, and I'll be talking to Sam today. I'm a fourth-year industrial engineering student here at the University of Toronto. Behind production is Arkady Arkhangorodsky, also a fourth-year engineering science student and the mastermind behind this operation. So today we're going to be talking to Sam. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey guys, my name is Sam. I am a fourth-year materials engineering student at U of T, doing a minor in bioengineering and a business certificate, and I did my PEY at Synaptive Medical for 12 months, and then I took the summer and I did a research exchange in England at the University of Liverpool. So I've always been kind of interested in bio-related stuff, broadly, I think. So that was kind of what motivated me to apply for medical device companies for PEY.
Nice.
I was kind of picky first term with my applications because I figured there's lots of different strategies people can take to apply to PEYs. I know some people who applied to like 15, or not applied, but interviewed for like 15, 16 positions and like turned down offers and stuff. But then I have one friend who interviewed for one job, did one interview, or applied for one job, one interview, accepted that job, and now she's going back there for full time.
And that's just good.
And that's just good, yeah. So like people don't freak out about your PEY application strategy, but so for me, I like picked to be applying to the jobs that I really wanted to do, and then I interviewed with Synaptive, and the experience was really great in the interview. I liked the people that I was talking to, and I got a great vibe from the company, so I ended up picking it pretty much right away.
All right. Was that like one of your earlier interviews?
Yeah, so I only interviewed 2 places on
Nice.
PEY. So I interviewed for a research position at Toronto Rehab, and then I interviewed for Synaptive. And the challenge was, the role of Synaptive was in quality, not in research, so it was like that trade-off of like, what kind of experience do you want? Do you want like a more like industrial kind of thing, or do you want more of a research-based thing? Yeah.
And then you decided to go with more of the industrial kind of thing. You have a background in research, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So, like what kind of stuff?
So the first thing I think of is actually in high school. I don't know if there's any Canada-wide Science Fair kids listening, but I was at the Canada-wide Science Fair twice in high school, and it was mandatory in my school to do science fair projects.
Okay.
So for like 5-6 years, every year I had to think of a research project idea and then execute it and then present it and then go to fairs and like do the thing. So that was my like first exposure. Like at the Canada-wide Science Fair, you suddenly see all these really smart, brilliant students at high school age doing like university level research, and so that to me was like, holy moly, like I want to get involved in this. So so in high school my research was actually related to social media, nothing to do with materials engineering, but at U of T I thought the research in the materials department was really cool. They were working on like flexible light stuff, and I was like, wow, that seems really innovative and disruptive. I want to do that.
Hashtag disruptive.
Hashtag disruptive, yeah. So like that was the innovation aspect of it was what brought me to materials. Where was I going with this? Talking about
well, just talking about how you ended up like doing research, but then deciding to go for a quality role.
Gotcha. Yeah. So like, I think because of my interest in innovation, and as you see this and work at different companies, you'll understand as well. Like, there's a lot of different aspects to getting a product to market other than just the research itself. So something that I was interested in my experience on PEY was not strictly research and development, but I also wanted to learn more about the other factors in how you can actually take something from the lab and put it in a hospital or in a person or in whatever situation you're trying to sell your product. So I thought that quality would be a really complementary thing for that, since most of my previous experience was in research. After first year I did research through materials engineering, so it was more fracture mechanics related stuff, so not so much like product development, but and then after second year I worked for an intellectual property firm doing patent stuff. So that was a great experience too, but then I wanted to work for like a technical company and maybe like a complementary kind of role to the experiences I already had, so that's why I picked quality.
Why have you had an interest in biology and like biocentric stuff?
Yeah, it's funny that I started with that because actually in high school I hated biology. So I refused to take grade 12 bio because I thought it was boring.
With you there.
You know, with you, I'm sure a lot of people in engineering are like that. And then I started working at this patent law firm, and I started seeing what kind of stuff was actually coming in from inventors and seeing where the money was, seeing where the innovation was, seeing where people were really trying to spend their time with their research dollars. And it kind of clicked for me that like, oh, hey, I'm interested in transdisciplinary work. Hey, I'm interested in helping people. This biomedical engineering thing seems pretty cool. It's not actually just about like poking cells under a microscope. Like there's a lot more you can do, like with medical device development, with like, there is traditional cell stuff too, but it's just such a huge like interdisciplinary area. It really attracted me for PUI.
Nice. So leading into that, you end up working at Synaptive. Can you give a brief description? What does Synaptive do?
Yeah, so Synaptive is a medical device company based in downtown Toronto, which was awesome for me. And they basically develop robotic and software systems to help perform neurosurgical procedures. So think about the way you would perform a neurosurgical procedure just with like a microscope in yourself. Like
super
you're
well.
Kind of, super well, right? Like you're kind of just behind the patient, you make an incision, you're sitting there with the microscope crunched over the patient's head for like 10 hours trying to do this procedure. And you're maybe not even getting the best visualization from the microscope that you're using in that awkward position that you're in. So Synaptive's suite of products does preoperative planning, so you can actually take an MRI scan of the patient and then get a good look at the fiber tracks in the brain and see what the best point of entry would be, like a Google Maps GPS of the patient's brain.
Nice.
And so then based on that, you can see more clearly where you should enter to resect your tumor. And then once you've made your plan, you can basically export it into the operating room. And so instead of crouching over your patient with a tiny little microscope, you have basically like 4 flat screen TVs you're looking at.
Wow.
And you have tracking between your surgical tool and basically like a camera watching you do the procedure. And then you can see like where you are in the patient with respect to your preoperative plan, kind of like a video game. So as you're performing the surgery, you can see not only like the visualization in front of you, because there's also like a robotic camera arm portion of it to do the imaging of the procedure, but you can also see where you are in the patient versus their plan and their MRI.
I mean, that just sounds like some Star Trek stuff.
Yeah, it's literally like a day at work. They'd be like, I remember last fall, we were working in one of the conference rooms, and then the director of marketing comes in and she starts talking about how like Chris Hadfield's on the phone about like wanting to do a collaboration because the technology from the arm originated from the Canadarm project, and we repurposed it into a surgical microscope at Synaptive to like accomplish the visualization stuff.
You can't hear this, but my jaw just dropped. So, what does it mean to work in quality?
Yeah, quality is something that ironically people don't necessarily think about right away when they think about medical devices. They're just like, whoa, cool, surgical, microscope, oh my god. But then with anything that involves a human being, there's risk inherent to the human being. So quality broadly is about managing that risk and minimizing it as far as possible. But the mechanisms by which quality achieves that are very complicated. So that's everything from like internal quality system stuff in your company to make sure that the way you do things in the company are safe and effective, and that extends from design control to manufacturing to like sales and the way you handle your patient data, and all the way to like servicing and post-market analysis kind of stuff. So quality is kind of like an octopus with a million arms that has their hand in everything to make sure things are safe and effective.
Right. Tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but ultimately it sounds like the goal of it is like to reduce variance. Just to make sure that things are the way you think they are.
Yeah, like in terms of keeping the patient safe, like that's the end goal. Like, and because of that end goal, a big part of quality is standard compliance and regulatory compliance. Because the way you do that is by making sure you comply to, like let's say FDA, like in the United States, to sell there you need to be regulatory compliant with them. Canada, we have Health Canada. Japan, there's a different one. Australia, there's a different one. And then on top of that, there's ISO standards for medical device quality management that are basically like meal tickets to sell, like no one will buy from you unless you have your ISO cert. So so that's like quality with the end goal of keeping the patient safe, like implements all this stuff in the company and then helps with the product design as well.
Again, this is like ESP stuff.
Yeah.
Like actually,
you and I have a
standards.
history in ESP.
We actually, that's where we met. So, like you mentioned that quality is like you said an octopus, just a lot of different things that go in there. So what does a day at work doing quality look like?
Yeah, so my role specifically, I was split between quality systems and design assurance.
Okay.
So quality systems work was specific to the standard compliance stuff. So in the context of my year, I started in May, right after school, and then we had a big audit coming up in February. And so more or less like the first big chunk of my year was making sure we were ready for the audit. So from a quality system standpoint, that's basically like checking out the company, assessing where the gaps are in terms of compliance, bringing ourselves up to the level of the new standard. And so there's a million different projects that come into that way related to that. So that could be related to the way we evaluate suppliers at the company and changing the controls that we put on our suppliers to make sure they're compliant to the level they need to be. That could be related to sales and marketing authorization, like how do we make sure we've checked all the boxes we need to check off before we ship something out the door. And the design control stuff was more related to managing the risks inherent with the product, and before you move forward in the design process, ensuring that you've considered all the possible hazards. So that's literally like sitting down with the product team, brainstorming what are all the things that could go wrong, and then like thinking about from there, what can we do to make things not go wrong, and then doing those things.
Okay, gotcha. So like pretty broad thinking on your feet type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So did that, the fact that it's like that broad and, you know, thinking on your feet, did that help with the learning curve? Because when you say Synaptive, I think like I can't even start to think about how that company does what it does. So did that help with the learning curve, the fact that it was kind of a broad role?
Kind of, yeah. Like I had a really big learning curve because going into this job, I didn't know anything about quality. So to go from that to like full on quality system implementation stuff, it was a lot. But it was really cool to work in so many different projects. Like I feel like I had such a broad experience, just not within quality and outside quality at the company, just because it's like small, and then at the stage it was at, everyone just needs help all the time. So it was easy to kind of like move around and ask people questions and like get up to speed when I needed to be. Like the other thing I did, I overlapped with the other PUI for a bit to get started, which was super helpful. And I'd actually learned how to code better during my PUI, which was cool as an MSc because we're not like a coding discipline.
Interesting,
yeah. So as part of this Octopus of quality, the thing at the center of it is basically this software that manages the way people do business processes in the company. So if you do things via the software, you're going to be standard compliant because it controls that. So I was writing JavaScript protocols basically to enable things to happen in that software. So like if we're like overhauling the supplier evaluations process, the way we do that is we like make people follow the new process by changing the software that they use to evaluate suppliers.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So then I would like design the processes, but then also like build them in the software.
So this is how you control like standards and change within the company, just from this one place.
Yeah.
So you've never done any kind of programming like other than just kind of the first year course?
Yeah. Pretty much.
So was that kind of like part of the learning curve? Like how did you approach that? Because I know, at least for me, there was one of the jobs I came in on where I didn't know how to program as well. That was terrifying because I didn't know where to start. So like how did you handle that?
Yeah, it was actually really exciting for me because I really, like a personal goal of mine over PUI was to get better at coding, and I'm miles ahead now from where I was like a year and a half ago, so that's super exciting for me. Basically, it helped to have the previous PUI there to help train, but honestly, the fundamental concepts from first year were there. Like, you know, for loops, if else, case break. Like, the way that software worked was literally basically that. Like, if this person checks this box, make them do this thing. If this person checks that box, do that thing. Like, and so it was easy to pick up, and then I got so into it, I ended up doing like an after work course in HTML and CSS for 2 months. Just to like, for fun, basically.
Gotcha.
And it was like a cool learning experience that helped me this summer when I did my research term in England. I worked with MATLAB like every day, and I was so much better going into that research experience having worked at Synaptive and like built out my coding skills, like even at a basic level, than I would have been just like heading into that straight on.
Nice.
Yeah.
Just for context for people listening, HTML and CSS are kind of like the initial skeleton building blocks of web development. That's what you use to build a website. So you were at Synaptive for 12 months.
Yeah.
How big a company is Synaptive?
About 250 people.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that the company changed quite a bit over those 12 months?
Yeah.
Yeah. How was that from your perspective as somebody who's managing change in standards?
Yeah, so definitely change management's a big part of quality and a big part of working in a company in general. One of the things that's cool about the PUI experience versus doing 4-month co-ops, we did have 4-month co-ops as well at Synaptive, so you got to see them come, see them go, see them come, see them go, and you're just this eternal being. You're the crusty PUI in the corner. The Waterloo babies come in and then they leave and then they come in again. But
the Pirates of the Caribbean thing, part of the crew, part of the shift.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're but no. So the other thing that comes with that is you're not just there for 3 months during the chill time in the summer. You actually get to see the ups and downs of the company, and you're there for the good days and for the bad days. So you have a more realistic outlook on what it's like to work somewhere full time. I think after doing a 12-month experience.
Right.
But yeah, so that was important to keep in mind. I would say heading into a 12-month position versus a 4-month.
Right. So you just mentioned good days, bad days. I think generally when we talk about anything in life, we tend to emphasize the good sides of things.
Yeah.
What does a bad day at work look like for you? What is that?
A bad day at work. I feel a bad day at work is a day when you're not inspired to be doing what you're doing. So whether that's something personal that's impacting your day,
Sure.
or whether it's a work thing that's impacting your day, a bad day for me is a day when I don't feel like doing what I'm doing. And that means that I either need to check in with myself or check in with the work problem or check in with whatever the thing is that's making it be a bad day, because that kind of intrinsically comes from the way you approach problems in your job.
Right.
You can't really blame you having a bad day at work on something else, because it's about your response to the bad thing more than it's about the thing itself.
Right. Okay, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah.
Did you find that there were more kind of larger scale ebbs and flows, and there's good days and bad over the course of your time there, or were bad days just kind of peppered through?
Well, so something I wanted to talk about on this podcast today was burnout, because that's something that people don't necessarily emphasize when they're just sitting on a PUI panel, or especially a career center sponsored one. You don't sit there and be so when I'm burned out on my PUI position, no. So, but it's not even that scary necessarily. It's just the other factor coming in from, most of us have intense third years. Third year is usually I personally was in 7 courses. I was vice president academic at the Engineering Society. I was applying for PUI jobs. Right. It was a lot all at once.
Right.
So then I also made the decision to go from final exams on a Friday into my full-time position on a Monday, and for 12 months. Yeah. So and then before that I had also done a continuous summer position and So sometimes I think as a student you don't think about this stuff because you are high energy and there's cool stuff going on and But then suddenly life happens, or something unanticipated happens, a family member gets sick, or something outside your control happens, and then you're kind of faced to holy crap, what do I do to make myself okay? And so that's something I learned how to do on PUI, was learn how to check in with myself and change my own approach to a bad day to make it a good day. And that took a lot of self-reflection and addressing mental health stuff. I learned how to meditate, which was super cool. Nice. I started doing yoga, which sounds super I didn't go to Silicon Valley, but I still learned how to do yoga and was meditating and whatever. But it honestly helps so much to just kind of check in with yourself and know that if you feel today's a bad day, that doesn't mean it's actually a bad day. It's just your take on the bad day. Right. And you can choose to not make it a bad day. All you have to do is just flip the switch in your brain, and you're this isn't actually a bad day. This is actually okay. Life's gonna go on, and I'm gonna do this cool thing. Right.
Well, I mean that's a really cool thing to talk about. When it comes to doing that switch flipping, would you say that you were able to kind of get out of a stage of burnout through the things like yoga or meditation? What was that process of going from I'm burned out to I'm okay again?
So for me, that was part of the reason why I wanted to do a research exchange in the summer. Travel is something I'm very passionate about, and it's my happy place basically. So I knew that even before I started applying to jobs, travel was something I wanted to integrate into my PUI experience. So yeah, it just ended up kind of being a bonus that I got to take that chance to like get away from life a little bit. Like when you do travel, like it's something that you're kind of just like, it automatically helps you check in with yourself because you're put out of all the things that you would be blaming for your bad day or whatever. Like suddenly you're in a new place and none of those things are there.
Right.
So you're like, well, I can't blame other people for my bad day now because it's just me in this awesome new place. Guess things are all right. Like, So it, I think like travel was definitely a big part of like helping with that. But at the same time, like learning meditation was like a huge thing because like if you actually like take that time like every day, whether it's like 1 minute or 10 minutes, just to like give your brain a break, like turn it off for a little bit, and then suddenly it just like does a U-turn on your perspective on your day.
Right. We'll get to the research like exchange. I want to hear about your time in the summer, but do you think that these things are going to carry into the way you do fourth year?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, like already going into fourth year, like this summer I hit like a 72-day streak on Headspace, which was amazing.
Nice.
And it ended when I like flew back here or whatever, but that was sad. But yeah, like I've been like keeping it up in the school year, and like so far it just is a really like healthy approach I think to take to things because it helps in fourth year that you get to pick all your own courses and like life is a little more chill in general than
it's more flexible.
It is. You're more flexible, yeah. And you've kind of like been through all the learning challenges of like getting to university, like learning how to study, like you've done all that stuff already. So then by the time you get to fourth year, you're just kind of like riding the wave out. And I think something like meditation or like whatever it is that grounds yourself is a cool thing to integrate to just like keep you chill. And that's something I never made a priority for myself until PUI.
Nice. Okay, so coming off of Synaptive, you mentioned that you ended up doing a research exchange in England. How did you end up doing that? Like, what's that process look like?
Yeah, so it's actually super easy for all you U of T students listening. Literally just walk to the Center for Engineering, or Center for International Experience, not the CEIE, the CIE, also on St. George Street. And they accept applications once a year. They usually do before December 1st. And there's, I think, 7 or 8 different schools that U of T has partnerships with for research exchanges.
Nice.
So I filled out a form and I sent it to the CIE. And then in January, they got back to me with the schools that had openings, more or less. And then I decided to go to Liverpool because it had the best materials related stuff of the schools that they offered, but it ended up being like an incredible destination as well, and I'm super glad I went there because like Liverpool, I guess it has like a historical reputation of being like a tough place and like a working town or whatever from like the Industrial Revolution, but like we're not in the Industrial Revolution anymore, it's actually a pretty nice place to be.
Okay, gotcha. So ended up enjoying your time. What kind of stuff were you researching there?
The stuff I was doing in Liverpool was related to contact lenses.
Okay.
So it was kind of cool to learn about a totally different take on medical devices, like contact lenses versus just like
robot arms that search in your brain.
Yeah, you know, they're different, right? Like contact lenses are squishy. There's like more like materials challenges with them. So basically we were doing a study to help improve fitting practices for soft contact lenses. You can imagine like when you take a soft contact out of the packaging and put it on your eye, the shape changes, which changes the optical path length of the optical material, and that means the prescription of the lens is not the same as what it was when it was in the packaging. So because of that, there's issues with fitting because everybody's eyeballs are shaped differently, and it's more or less a trial and error thing. Like clinicians don't really know the answer either. They just kind of rely on their like vast wealths of experience, but then it like gets to certain challenges when you have like challenging eyes to fit or people with really extreme prescriptions. So basically what I was doing this summer was helping develop a mathematical model and doing finite element analysis to simulate which design factors in contact lenses most affect power change on the eye. So like if you have lenses that are like this, they're the most likely to have power changes. Lenses like that are like less likely to have power changes. So like quantifying that using the finite element software.
Okay, got it. So were you joining like a pre-existing project? Was that kind of like the goal of the thing?
Kind of. So the group I worked with was in ocular biomechanics. So they did all kinds of crazy stuff related to the eye, and it was super cool. I was the only person working on my project other than my supervisor, and that was a really cool experience because I basically got to lead the whole thing.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and it was only in 2.5 months, so it was a lot to get done within that time, but it was really cool to learn about like an entirely new field of medical devices and research that I hadn't been exposed to before. That's equally important and like valid as like an area of research. So it was involving like clinical stuff because we'd have clinical questions like if we're like 3 engineers sitting around a table trying to figure out how to solve a problem, but then it's a problem that only clinicians know the answer to because there is no academic answer.
Right.
That's like some of the challenges in contact lenses.
Uh-huh.
So apparently in the UK as well, it's actually BBC reporters who are the most interested in contact lens studies because they can't wear glasses when they do their reporting thing.
Why can't they wear glasses when they do their reporting thing?
It's something to do with production and like the camera glare from the contact or from the glasses and stuff like that. Like it just doesn't look good. So then if you want to be a BBC reporter, you have to wear contact lenses. But then if you don't have a great fit or like your third fitting doesn't go well and you have to pay more money, it's hard to get that fit. So apparently reporters are banging down the doors of all the contact lens manufacturers in the UK to come up with more comfortable lenses.
Wow, that is so aggressively niche. That is
PBY guys.
Yeah. That is fantastic.
Yeah.
So I mean, we'll get to your version of British reporting in a second. But you mentioned that like you really enjoyed traveling, and that you were in Liverpool. But at the same time, you had a really intense research placement. You had to get a lot done in what 2.5 months? You said?
Yeah, 2.5 months.
Right. What's the balance like there?
Yeah, I mean, so I say I had an intense research placement, but like coming from an engineering like lens of what we do in school versus what anyone does in a research placement, it wasn't as intense as like what you're used to in school.
As just full-time school?
Yeah. So, and like plus overall, like research in the summer, like it was an intense position, but it wasn't like it was as intense as the school year, let's say.
Okay,
so,
gotcha.
yeah, and I had a supportive supervisor who asked me if I wanted to take Fridays off to travel, and I didn't really think twice about that, as I don't think other people would either.
Sure, yeah.
So, so I did a lot of traveling on the weekends, which was awesome.
What kinds of places would you go? Like was it mostly within England, or?
Yeah, I went to some places within England. So I finished at Synaptive in the end of April, and my position didn't actually start till mid-June. So it took a month, and I did some other stuff like in consulting for intellectual property, but then I went backpacking for the last like 3 weeks before my internship started, which was really fun. So just like going off and Western Europe mostly, and then I ended up in Liverpool at the end of it, and then on weekends I went to like nearby airport accessible places.
Okay, gotcha. That's really cool. You write about that now.
Yeah. So at the end of the summer. So I hit 20 countries this summer, which was a pretty exciting milestone for me in terms of traveling. And I thought that I could probably do something with all that information that I've got in my brain about like Western Europe and travel and stuff. So I started a travel blog. It's called Ready Set Zen.
We'll like it.
Yeah, like me on Facebook and Instagram. So it's still getting started, and I've been busy for the past few weeks, but hopefully by the time this airs, it'll have a few more posts. So like my idea with the travel blog, I started at the end of the summer because I had so much like experience from not just like working in research, but like also kind of like mindfulness and then travel at the same time. So I wanted to take an opportunity to like channel all of my like awesome travel stories, but also like talk about the importance of like learning mindfulness while you travel, because that's kind of what I did this summer. I like learned how to meditate.
Like while you traveled?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. What was it, just through Headspace, like the app?
Yeah, literally Headspace. So people, if you haven't used it before, it's literally on the App Store. The guy who founded it, Addy Puttycombe, I think is his name.
Sure.
He literally decided to become a monk. He's from England, and he got through part of, I think, a sports medicine degree, and then just decided he wanted to become a monk. And so he went and became a monk, and then came back to either England or the States, and just kind of like realized that a lot of like the teachings from his time in Tibet could be applied to like workplace/life management kind of in like Western work culture. And so he founded Headspace, so to do basically like really simple guided meditations without any of the religious stuff. So don't worry about if religious issues with that. It's totally separated to kind of just like the neuroscience aspects of it, and like the kind of stuff that's going to help you balance your brain.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
And so through that while traveling. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned something else that you did like before and after like the research placement. Correct me if I'm getting this wrong. But you did some stuff with intellectual property. So you mentioned you've done a bunch of things with intellectual property, both like the summer before you like the PUI, but also just like at Synaptive. What did you get up to?
Yeah. So after my second year, I did a 4-month internship in intellectual property, which was how I learned anything about that whole area. And then when I was at Synaptive, one of the things I really liked about working there was it still kind of was a startup, even though it was like 250 people. Like people needed help across the board, so I ended up getting pulled into the intellectual property team for part of the year. So I learned how to do IP from like an internal company standpoint, which is different than working for a firm. Because at a firm you have 1 million clients and you're doing one-off things for them, but like when you work inside a company in IP, you're kind of concerned about their entire portfolio, all related to that company, and then the inventors are usually like upstairs, like in the building, versus like at a firm they're in a totally separate location somewhere on planet Earth. Yeah, so then after I finished at Synaptive, there was still stuff that needed to be done with the IP team, and they were interested in keeping me on board in some kind of remote capacity, and so I ended up doing consulting for them over the summer in terms of IP. So that was in like May, June, like while I was traveling, and then on top of that, my parents run a business and they hire PUIs with like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's called Isowater Corporation. It's in Collingwood, and then they also had a lot of needs for IP because they don't have an internal IP team. And then I kind of realized that, oh, hey, there's a market for this. Like, people will pay money for, like, independent intellectual property services that aren't the crazy complicated stuff you get a firm for, but you can pay, like, an independent someone like me, like, a lower rate than you'd pay a firm to, like, do a similar thing, and then hand it off for a firm for, like, 1 hour instead of 10 hours at the firm to do the whole thing.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
I think just as some background on this, what does it mean to like work on intellectual property? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, so IP is actually a really cool field. It's related to capturing inventions, but also kind of maintaining them after you've filed the patent. So one of the first considerations is this thing actually patentable? And that means asking if it's novel, if it has utility, which means like, does it actually like do a useful thing? And then if it's inventive, which basically means like, it's kind of a complicated thing to explain, but to be inventive means like you can't take invention A and invention B, combine them to get your invention. You've like taken that extra step so that combining other people's inventions will not equal your own invention. So then a big part of working with patent stuff is figuring out how your client's invention is inventive, novel, and useful in the context of everything else that exists out there. So that's one of the things I really liked doing. So learning how to like write patents and like interview inventors to actually like assess what those things are. Because the inventor might think it's one thing, but a patent law firm thinks it's something totally else because the inventor hasn't necessarily read the landscape of the prior art.
And that's your job.
Yeah, exactly. So then you review the prior art and you see where the invention fits in the context, and then you basically just sell that really hard in the application. And then once it comes back, usually the country that you filed it in isn't just going to give it to you right away, even if it's a really good application. They're going to come up with some issues with it so that they make more money because they make money as they issue arguments at you. But then you as the patent agent or firm or whoever has to respond to those arguments to basically justify why you still think your invention is novel, inventive, and useful. So that's also an interesting process because the office that's issuing the arguments will pull other pieces from the prior art and say like, you said that your thing is inventive, but actually if you take application A and application B and then combine this like little sprinkle from application C, we think it would create the same thing as your invention. So then you have to read application A, B, and C, understand what they all do respectively, and then argue why your invention would not actually literally be A, B, and C combined. Because a lot of the time you think about what that thing would be, which is A, B, and C, it's usually something ridiculous.
But they're just making that argument because they get more money.
Yeah, and like it's also good to like question people about their stuff to like for due process and stuff. Like you don't want to just throw patents willy-nilly at people.
So what you just described sounds a lot like being a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like, it sounds like you are making arguments on a legal basis for the benefit of your client.
Kind of, yeah.
So do you think, did it take you having any type of background in law to like do this? Or like how did you get to be like, oh, I'm confident in being able to do that?
I think like largely I learned how to do all that stuff when I did an internship at a patent law firm.
Sure.
So in intellectual property, you can either be a lawyer to work in it and like go to law school, have your law degree and deal with like litigation stuff. Like this person's stealing my invention, I'm going to sue them, And then there's the whole side where you're actually trying to like grant patents for people and get people to like complete patent applications and issue them. And that's more of a patent agent job, and you don't actually need to be a lawyer to be a patent agent.
Right.
There's actually no education requirements either. You just need to have 2 years of work experience under a patent agent, and then you need to pass 5 or 4 really, really hard exams.
Oh, so that's it.
That's it. Yeah. Like, no big deal. Like, it's like a 4% pass rate or something for all of the first go. Yeah. So no big deal, guys. Anyone can be a patent agent, but no. But in all seriousness, it definitely has legal things you have to learn. Like you have to navigate the language, which is the hardest thing.
Right.
But once you've kind of got the hang of that and you know how to talk the talk, it's not that hard to do the technical stuff if you have an engineering background. Mm-hmm. Because logically you can apply your engineering background to reviewing the prior art, and like you look at the figures, you look at the abstract, you look at claim 1, and that's basically like the essence of a patent. And then you can understand the gist of what they're trying to do.
Okay, gotcha. So were you working on this before you left for the research placement? Like this is kind of the independent side of things?
Yeah, it all kind of happened just like serendipitously, if that's a word.
It's a word. It's a word. No, you got it.
You can fact check me. So I worked for my dad's company in May because I had a month break between my research position and they needed some help. So that was largely like remote work because IP you can do that kind of stuff remote. Sure. But I did go on site and help to capture something that they're working on filing stuff for, which was cool. So then that's basically like you get to go around, you get to take a look at the magical invention and like understand what the points they're trying to capture are in your patent application. And so for me, that was basically what I was doing was like remote IP stuff. And then in the summer, I also picked up other work from like Synaptive, like other things, and it just kind of became like a bit of a business.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. Is that something that you want to continue kind of in the future?
So I haven't ruled it out necessarily, but I think I'm interested in other things than just IP.
Okay, right.
Because going back to like my whole thing, like I'm interested in innovation. Like I've always kind of been drawn to like the cool shiny stuff.
Right.
Whether that was like the flexible light thing in MSc or like
robotic
arms, you know, like patents are pretty cool because they're usually about super innovative stuff.
Inherently about new stuff.
Yeah, inherently about new stuff. So like that's kind of like, I was talking to my friend yesterday about like me trying to figure out my interests because it's so hard to, at least for me, I find it hard to like narrow my interests down into like one thing. So I am interested in like innovation, and so that's kind of what drew me to like patents. It's what drew me to like Synaptive. It's what drew me to like research stuff, and then I'm going to probably continue doing my own IP consulting stuff for a little while, but then I want to go to grad school and keep on building my like technical skills as well because I want to work in a more technical role than just IP.
Okay, so has that kind of like decision to go to grad school been impacted by your experience over the past 16 months? Was that something that you already wanted to do, or is that a new tack?
Yeah, so I always had ambitions of going to grad school. My vision of what I think grad school will be has changed for sure. And it definitely helped to have like the industry perspective on grad school versus like my own personal take. The feedback I got from industry was kind of like, do grad school if it's something you like really personally want in your life. Like if you like looking back on your life as an old person, like do you want to have gone to grad school? If yes, go to grad school. Like if you're just doing like if you're just doing it because you don't know how to deal with life as an adult and you want 2 more years in school, like don't do grad school.
Right.
You know, so like I think I'm more like the former in the sense that like I really personally want that experience. So I knew I was always going to be going to grad school.
Right.
But like my idea of like what I wanted to study has definitely changed.
Okay, gotcha. How has that changed from what to what?
Yeah. So I used to think I wanted to do like a traditional like biomedical engineering research degree, and then now I'm doing a super cool biomedical thesis, which is awesome, and I've got like a year of biomedical work experience and summer internships and stuff, and I'm like, I don't think doing 2 years more in strictly academic biomedical research is going to get me any further than where I'm going to land after graduation. But that's just me, because I'm also doing a bio minor and stuff. So like I feel like I'm going to like hit my saturation point there, and like that was something I realized like last summer, like with my planning my courses and stuff. I was like, oh man, like maybe I'm actually going to like hit off a lot of my goals that I had for this master's degree already. So then thinking about that, I decided I wanted to shift my search to something a little more like interdisciplinary. Okay. So I'm looking more at like design research-based programs now. Okay,
gotcha. What is that?
Like in the sense of like product design, I guess. I'm applying to like some programs that are like specific to product design, like some programs that are specific to like medical device commercial or medical device design and entrepreneurship, like sort of like a design from more of like an artsy point of view kind of than like an engineering point of view. Yeah.
Okay, so just getting the other perspective on that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned we met in first year, we were on the same ESP1 team.
Yes.
Would Sam from them have at all thought that she'd be doing the things that you're thinking of doing now?
Absolutely not, no.
Okay.
Yeah, because first year I had such low grades. I was like, I'm never going to go to grad school. I'm never going to be a smart person. This is my future. Like, because like first year is like when like stuff hits the fan for people. So yeah. So no, ESP1 Sam would not have thought that I would be sitting here doing this stuff. But like at the same time, I was also a nerd back then, and I'm a nerd now, so like some things have stayed kind of consistent.
That's a good through line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like you were always kind of had like that engineering mindset, regardless of like what Mark said, which is like a beautiful thing to see.
That's true.
So you did a TEDx talk on something that is similar to that, or like this idea of like taking engineering through. Why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, for sure. So TEDx talk was something that also happened like serendipitously on my PUI. I spoke at TEDx Collingwood last fall. Collingwood's my hometown. It is like a kind of a vacation town like on Georgian Bay.
It's near Blue Mountain.
Yeah, near Blue Mountain, all that stuff. And it was an amazing experience overall to get the chance to like share something with such an engaged audience in like a TEDx setting. And another theme that's kind of been consistent in my university experience is STEM outreach. That's something I've always been very passionate about since I participated in like science fairs and stuff in high school. Like I really benefited from other people doing STEM outreach to me as a high school student, if that makes sense. Like I did a lot of like those youth outreach programs and stuff, and like that was super formative in like getting me to where I am now. So as soon as I basically like got accepted into university, I was like, okay, what am I gonna do to like help other kids have like the same experience that I had, / like other people who are like in remote areas and stuff, like help them get more exposed to STEM. Yeah. So I volunteered with like Science Expo Youth Empowerment Group in first year, and I ran high school in second year, which is the NSOC Engineering Outreach project directorship, and I did some like public speaking stuff as well with the Canadian Engineering Memorial Foundation and like some stuff with Youth Science Canada. So just overall,
you've done this a bunch.
I've done stuff.
Yeah.
So I got to this like point in PUI where I had a lot of narratives built up, like talking to people at all these events and like listening to like the same story again and again and again about like youth who are like interested in and engaged in STEM, but they just really didn't know what to do with themselves. Like they had no idea like the differences between like biology and like physics and like being a doctor and being an engineer. Like in terms of university, like it's all just kind of a gray or black box for a lot of people who don't have like an engineer in their family to like show them the way. So I wanted to take my TEDx talk as a platform / opportunity to like make like a short video that like a teacher could put on in a classroom or like someone could put on somewhere, and you'd have an idea of what engineering is about at the end of the video. And that was kind of like what I like went into it with the goal of being. So I addressed more or less just like the disconnect between high school student ambitions and things they say that they want to do in their life based on engineering education research. So like the disconnect between that and like what they think engineering is about. Because what they think engineering is about is more like the things they want to do and less like the things that they think it's about. If that makes sense. Yeah, like the things that would come up as like being an engineer, you're like setting up factories and like being basically like an auto mechanic. Like those are like the kinds of like images that were coming to mind in like 2014 Canadian high school students. Like think that. So there's like
they think wrenches.
Yeah, wrenches. Like, you know, like you're like jacking your car up. You're like sliding underneath on the thing. Like that's absolutely not what engineering is like.
We know this.
We know this. Yeah, the people listening to this podcast know this. But there's a lot of people out there who don't have someone in their life to share that experience with them. Like my dad's an engineer. I was like lucky enough that I like had someone to like guide me in that direction. When I like thought I wanted to do physics, I thought I wanted to do like something like, I don't know, like other than engineering, but then not everybody necessarily has that like exposure through just regular high school curriculum and like a regular high school experience. So in my talk, I talked about like what everyday people can do who are like listening to this talk to help start a conversation about engineering and like get more people involved in awareness of like the role engineers play in society.
That's awesome. Okay. Do you think that's the kind of work that you want to continue doing going forward?
I think it's super important. Yeah. Like in general, I think we should always. So from my TED talk, my call to action for engineers. You guys can look it up. But my call to action to engineers is to share your story, which is exactly what you guys are doing with this podcast, which is so awesome because not everybody knows what the story of an engineer is, like because people don't know what engineering is about. So you as an engineer, anybody as an engineer, talking to youth about your experiences, talking to like friends who have kids or like friends who like have teachers, like other things, like sharing the experience of what it means to be an engineer in like 2018 is so impactful because you really never know who's listening and who you might just totally blow their mind just as something that seems like arbitrary to you, like because there's just such a disconnect, like it's wild. So that's my philosophy in general. So I just plan to like continue doing stuff in that area as it comes up.
That's awesome. Well, we're running low on time, so thank you for sharing your engineering stories.
Hey!
Huge plug. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
I mean, you're a great interviewer. I was saying you could have an MTV career or whatever you want to. But
yeah, let's try Iron Ring first.
Iron Ring first, MTV second. But no, this has been amazing. Thanks for having me on, Ilya.
Awesome. I guess the last thing is, if people want to reach out to you to ask you about any of the things that you talked about, or just in general, like as a mentor, where can they find you?
Yeah, so if you want to just talk to me personally, like the best way to get me is email. So my U of T address is samantha.stewart@mail.utoronto.ca. And if you want to follow my blog, you can on Facebook or Instagram, and that should cover it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll link those below. Awesome. Well, Sam, thanks for being on.
Thanks, Ilya.
Sweet. So this has been That Thing I Did for a Year. We'll see you next time.